Show. I am your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers from around the world and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. Today with us, we have Mike Hingson. Hello, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I am pretty good. If anyone is watching, they will notice that I'm not in my normal spot. Um, because it's really, really hot upstairs in my office, and I melted when was getting ready to do it. So I took the computer, and I'm actually sitting in my kids' room because it is the coldest room in the house.
How hot is it where you are?
Well, my air conditioner says it's fighting to be at 75 right now. Um, when it's set to 70. And outside, that's in Fahrenheit because I don't know. My
Yeah.
thermometer in
Yeah.
the house is Fahrenheit, but outside in my car, it says it's 37 degrees Celsius plus
Ooh, so
humidity.
that's
So I think
it's
it's
over
almost like
100 Fahrenheit.
45, 49 after humidity.
Oof.
It's
Well,
gross.
it's probably about 42 Celsius here,
Ugh.
and that is without humidity. So
Oh,
there.
yeah. I can handle that. I can handle the hot with no humidity. It's as soon as you put humidity in, I just
Yeah.
die. So,
Well,
woo.
and inside the house it's 73. So
See, I like 73, but my air is just struggling to stay even at 75. Granted, my house is over 100 years old and the air is not
mhm.
the best circulated through. Like the machine is new, but like it doesn't circulate the best.
Yeah, well, we've got insulation and everything else here, and it's a well, not brand new now. It's going to be 9 years old in December, but it's still a new house, so the insulation is great and all that. So
Yeah.
it's a blessing.
Well, that's good. I'm glad for you. Um, so enough about the icky weather. Tell us a little bit about who the heck Mike is.
Mike, well, Mike is a guy who lives in Southern California. I've lived in Victorville since around July 1st or so of 2014. I never thought I'd be living back down here. I grew up
Hmm.
in a town 55 miles west of here, but my wife became ill with double pneumonia in January of 2014. And family started putting in a lot of pressure. She recovered from it. Her lungs were like 90% occluded with pneumonia, but
Oh
she was
wow.
able to recover. Yeah, it was pretty
Yay.
bad. And family said, you should be closer to us so we can help if there's an emergency in the future. Not that moving down here really made a big difference. But anyway, so we
Thought
agreed
that
and
counts?
yeah, we moved down here. We looked for places to build a house. My wife had been in a wheelchair her whole life. And so we wanted to build an accessible house. And the only place we found where there was property to build in was this town called Victorville. Now, when I was growing up about 55 miles west of here in a town called Palmdale, Victorville, well, Palmdale had like 2,800 people in it. And I described Victorville as not even being a speck on a radar scope compared to Palmdale. But my gosh, we got down here in 2014 in July, um, and it was a town of over 115,000 people.
Okay.
And it's grown since then. So anyway,
Oh,
so
it's
we've
more
lived
than I
down
got.
here there you go. We've lived down here now for 11, well, it's been now over 11 years. I was just computing a little while ago because we moved
Wow.
down here in July of 2014, and here it is August of 2025. And so anyway, um, who is Mike? So I've been
Ask
blind
us.
my entire life. I was born in Chicago. We moved out here when I was 5. And my parents brought me up with an attitude that I could do whatever I chose to do. The doctors told them when they discovered I was blind that I should just be sent to a home because no blind child could ever amount to anything.
How
And
lovely.
my,
Lovely.
yeah, well, my parents said, you're wrong. And they brought me up with that attitude. So I did all the things that kids did. I joined the Boy Scouts. I became an Eagle Scout with 2 extra palms, and I also joined the Order of the Arrow. I was inducted into the Honor Society for the Boy
What is
Scouts and
that? The
became
Order of the Arrow? I
Order
don't.
of the Arrow is an honor society within the Boy Scouts. Very few people relatively speaking, are invited to join it. My brother and I
Oh.
were, and we became both Vigil, which is the highest rank in Order of the Arrow. Um, and
Oh.
so I did that. I was always interested in science and did that in high school, went to college, got a university bachelor's and then master's degree in physics from the University of California at Irvine, and a secondary teaching credential. And then I went to work, and I was very fortunate to have a job out of college. Most blind people don't get that opportunity,
Yeah.
but I was offered an opportunity to help in a program that the National Federation of the Blind and Ray Kurzweil, who was an inventor in the 70s, he's become known for a variety of things. But anyway, Ray had developed a machine that literally would read any print out loud for blind people. And
Oh.
so we worked to get that perfected. And then I did that for a while, and that ended up leading to a job with Ray's company. And after being there about 9 months, I was called into the office of the VP of marketing, and I was told I was being laid off. And I went, "Why?" "Oh, it's not that you're doing a bad job. We like what you're doing,
Yeah.
but we've hired way too many non-revenue producing people, like a lot of engineering startup companies do, and we
Yeah.
have to lay people off and get revenue producers in, so we have to lay you off."
Mm.
And then he waited a second and he said, "Unless you're willing to go into sales."
Oh, so they really didn't want to get rid of you.
Well, not only that, they didn't want me to sell the reading machine for the blind. They had developed a new commercial machine that was like twice
Oh.
the price of the reading machine, and they wanted me to sell that to the East Coast, to the New England area, and Canada.
Okay.
So I started.
Okay.
I learned how to sell. I went to a Dale Carnegie sales course, and I started selling. And
Yeah.
basically, realized I've been selling my whole life anyway, but I've been professional selling since 1979.
Wow.
And Xerox bought the company, and I and other salespeople were phased out because they didn't want anything except the technology. So um, I I eventually had to form my own company to get a job, and then did that for 4 years, and then sold the company and went back into the workforce, and eventually was hired away by another company after moving uh, to New Jersey and working in New York when I joined a company in 1989. It was a
Okay.
company based in Carlsbad, California, which from where I was living was about 45 miles south of where we were living in a town called Mission Viejo. The we being at
Okay.
that time my wife, who I married in 1982, Karen. As I said, Karen had been in a wheelchair her whole life. So anyway,
Hmm.
Karen and I got married in November of 1982. Then this job came along, and I took it down in Carlsbad, and we moved to a town right by Carlsbad called Vista, and lived there for 6 years. But then I was selling for the company to Wall Street. Wall Street likes companies to have a true manufacturer representative in the area of New York City. So I ended up having to move to New York City, which we did. We moved to New
Sounds like you
Jersey
moved
actually.
all over the place.
We've been to a variety of places between the Kurzweil projects and everything. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been to a number of states. In fact, altogether now I can say I've been in every state in the union. I haven't lived
Wow.
in every state in the union, but I've been in every state in the United States.
I haven't even been to
Anyway,
every province, and there's less of those. So,
well, yeah, come on. Now, what's the Northwest Territory called? It's different now, isn't it?
well, they split it into two. So Northwest Territories is still a territory, but they split it, and there's also none of it.
None of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Where'd that name come from?
I'm gonna guess one of the like an Inuit name
And
because that's
yeah,
what.
must be an
Yeah.
Inuit name of some sort. Anyway, so we moved down to Carlsbad, and then I moved to New Jersey and worked in New York. And I actually worked in number two World Trade Center for a year, then was recruited away and opened an office for another company. And then in 1999, another company hired me and recruited me away to open an office for them in New York City. And that eventually led to us moving, well, not moving, but opening the office on the 78th floor of Tower One of the World Trade Center in
Oh wow.
the actual August 2000 was when the that office officially opened.
Oh
So we've been all over.
wow. Okay, so through all of that, and more, I'm sure. Um, how did you handle everything? I mean, the show's about mental health and how we're doing and how we're feeling. I know I don't do well with change, and that many moves I think I would have lost my bananas. So how did you handle everything?
Well, I grew up being blind in a world where change happened all the time. So, for example, let's go back to the time I worked for the National Federation of the Blind and then Kurzweil. I lived when I worked for the Federation during the Federation part of the process. It was a project, and I literally lived in hotels out of suitcases for 18 months.
Oh my gosh.
And then I lived in Winthrop, Massachusetts for 3 years. One of the things that I talk about is that at that time, Massachusetts had the highest accident rate per capita in the country
Oh
among
wow.
drivers. And it was no surprise because when I would come to a street corner and want to cross the street, I could start and suddenly I could hear a car coming from
Oh.
behind me. And the way I knew it was safe to cross the street was that the traffic was going the way I wanted to go. It wasn't going across in front of me. Hey,
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
a master's degree in physics, you learn that if a car is going across in front of you, you don't want to kind of step into the path of the car because it could hit you, and it's bigger than you are, and you're going to be smushed. It's a
I'm glad
logical
you got
thing.
that
So
master's degree to know that.
yeah, it really helped. And so I learned that I got to go the way the cars are going. Well, I didn't
Mhm.
learn it just from that, but the bottom line is that I learned it. So here I am. I start to cross the street and I hear a car coming, and it doesn't sound like it's going to slow down and stop at the light. And the bottom line is I don't know what the car is going to do. And oftentimes it doesn't stop at the light, it turns. And if it turns and I'm out in the middle of the street, that could be an issue.
Yeah.
So as I said, I learned very quickly to be observant and to be able to deal with surprise. And so I at times had to suddenly decide, do I continue to run to finish crossing the street, or is it better to just back up and get to the curb to avoid the
Mhm.
car? So those kinds of things really helped me learn to cope with things that were different than what I would normally face in
Yeah.
life. And so I've got to say I actually did pretty well coping with change. Oh, there were things to learn. I had to learn new areas. I had to learn how to go from one place to another. So when moved to Winthrop, when I moved to Winthrop, I wasn't married then. When I moved to Winthrop and had to go through Boston to Cambridge, Massachusetts to go work at Kurzweil, I had to learn um, not only the subway system to get there, but then I had to learn how to go from Kendall Square Station in Cambridge through a very large parking lot by a store called at that time Leechmere, which later closed,
Mm.
and go through that parking lot and successfully get to the place to get over to Kurzweil. But all those things are learnable.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the decision to deal with change was one of saying, I'm going to have to deal with change probably my whole life. Learn to like it and don't let it frighten you. So I didn't always like change, but I tolerated change. And as time went on, I learned better how to deal with it. So I hear what you're saying, but the bottom line is that in reality, change is all around us. Change is everywhere around us. And
Yes.
we are taught, even though the world changes all the time, we're taught not to like change and to fear change. And fortunately, I learned not to do that. So I learned to cope with things that become different.
All right. Well, that makes sense, especially when you think about, yeah, your surroundings and just needing to figure out how to get from point A to point B. I assume, I mean, especially listening to you, it's very different when you're blind. I think we take it for granted that we can just easily follow the trail here and there, whereas you have to kind of figure it out a little bit more.
Well, the issue is a little bit more basic than that. You follow the trail, you read the signs, and you don't learn to know necessarily what to do. For
Yeah.
me, I've discovered that I need to know it. So, for example, and we haven't talked about it yet, but working in the World Trade Center, I learned all that I could about the complex. I learned where things were. I learned what the emergency evacuation procedures were. I learned where the emergency exits were. I learned all of that, so it became true knowledge for me, not information. That
Mm.
also meant that by learning that, it created a mindset. So if there were ever a problem, I would know what to do. And likewise, anywhere I went, I spend time learning what I need to learn in order that I can be able to do what I need to be able to accomplish whatever task comes along. So my local airport, for example, here, I learned when we moved to Victorville and I started traveling to other places. I spent some time learning the airport, um, and I got help from some people at the airport and just also wandering around because I also learned that getting lost is great because the more you get lost, the more you figure out from getting lost where you are and how to get around. So
That's a good
getting
way to
lost
put
is a
it.
wonderful thing. But the bottom line is that I learned it. And so I can go to Ontario Airport, Ontario, California Airport. I generally fly out of one terminal, so I know it well. And I also can get around the other terminals. And airports aren't all that magical anyway. But the bottom line is I learned what to do, which is what I needed to do in order to be able to function.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, you've said it a couple times, the World Trade Center. Um, Tell me what it was like working there.
It's an interesting place because where we were at that time, there were two towers. They were 110 stories tall. And there were a few other small buildings, but those were the main buildings. And there was an area between them on the first floor that was a shopping mall. It had a number of stores,
Oh, I didn't know that.
um, drugstores. Yeah, there was actually a shopping mall there. And there was a shoe shine stand, there was a drugstore, there were restaurants and other things. And so I learned how to travel with all those things. And I learned what to do in order to be able to get around. Then, of course, something happened on September 11th.
Hmm.
That is, the terrorists attacked the towers and destroyed them. But for me, I had learned all that I could about what to do in the case of an emergency. I learned what to do if, especially if there were fire, to not take elevators. I knew where the elevators were, how to get to them. No matter where I was in the complex, I learned how to get around. So when it all happened, a mindset kicked in for me and it allowed me to know what to do and it allowed me more time to be observant. So, for example, my guide dog, Roselle, if she had panicked in any way, my immediate assumption would be there was a reason for it. She
Yeah.
didn't panic at any time because nothing really happened to directly threaten her. The fire wasn't near us or anything like that. So, again, having all that information told me how to behave and how to act and to help other people to keep them focused and calm to do the same thing. And
Hmm.
so that's what I did. And we all got out, and and there were times that other people were involved as well. There was a gentleman who was with me in the World Trade Center that day. He came in from our corporate office. His name was David Frank, and David was in the office because he was responsible for distribution pricing to our partners. And we were going to be doing seminars that day to teach a bunch of our partners how to sell our products. And David was there to talk about the pricing. I was going to be doing the actual presentations, the PowerPoint shows, and so on, because I could do all that. And I was going to be their major contact anyway. My
Yeah.
staff was out working at the time. So um, when the airplane hit the tower and the building kind of tipped and then it came back. Then, after it got straight, I left where I was standing. I was actually just standing in the doorway between my door and the outer office.
Okay.
I grew up in Palmdale where there were earthquakes all the time, and you learned earthquake happens, go stand in doorway. Yeah, that really works when you're on the 78th floor of a building, but But anyway, I went back in. I met my guide dog Roselle coming out from under my desk. I told her to heel, which meant to come around on my left side and sit, which she did. Then the building dropped straight down. And there are reasons for that because it's built with expansion joints and made to be able to flex in the breeze or even if an airplane hit it.
Yeah.
No one, however, expected someone to hit the building with an airplane full of 26,000 pounds of jet fuel, which
Yeah.
is what happened. So anyway, um, David and I were there, and so David started seeing fire and kind of panicking, and I kept saying, "Slow down, David." And finally, David said, "You don't understand. You can't see it." The big line that everybody uses. Well, the reality is, it wasn't what I wasn't seeing. It was what David wasn't seeing or able to understand.
Mhm.
Namely, I had a dog sitting next to me who was just wagging her tail and going, "Who woke me up?" and yawning and not indicating fear. So that told me that whatever was going on wasn't so imminent of a threat that we couldn't try to evacuate in an orderly way. So I told David, get our guests to the stairs, start them down, then come back and we'll leave. He did. And then we went to the stairs and we started down. And when we got to the 50th floor, he kind of lost it and said, "Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here." And I just said in my sharpest, how to yell at students teacher voice, "Stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you." And he told me later that that brought him out of his funk, which is what I intended. And he said, "I want to," he told me that later, but he said immediately after I shouted at him, "Okay, I'm okay now. I want to walk a floor below you and shout up to you what I see. Is that okay?" And I said, "Sure, if you want to." Did it really matter to me? No.
I think
But,
it gave him a purpose and kept
well,
him
it,
focused.
it, it kept him focused, but it did something else, which is the real issue behind it. That is, he got like to the 47th floor. I was on 48, and he said, "Hey, Mike, I'm on the 47th floor. All's good here." David became a focal point for anyone within the sound of his voice who could hear him,
Oh,
who
yes.
knew somewhere in the World Trade Center there was somebody who was okay. And
Hmm.
that had to keep so many people from panicking. And it
Yeah.
isn't talked about very much, so I choose to talk about that.
Right. And it's such a simple thing,
Yeah,
really. Like you don't even think about it, especially
no,
David probably wasn't thinking about, oh, I want everybody to hear. He was
no,
like, hey, I
he
want you
wasn't.
to know what's coming up.
Yeah, he wasn't, but that's okay.
No,
So
but that's
anyway,
what I think is great about it is that
it
it was
is,
just something so
and it's,
simple and it probably helped a lot of people.
oh, it could have helped thousands of people, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So anyway, we made it down and we got out. And again, what I realized many years later was that in fact, what had happened is a mindset kicked in. And it was a mindset that said, you know what to do. Because I had learned all of the stuff, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And as somebody pointed out to me in a recent episode of Unstoppable Mindset, my podcast, there's a difference between information and knowledge. Information is there, but you haven't necessarily really absorbed it or internalized it. Knowledge is when you really know something and can have the
Hmm.
confidence to deal with it. And for me, it wasn't information that I had gained, it was knowledge.
Hmm.
Yes, people told it to me or gave me data, but I internalized it. And that's what really helped me be able to function and survive.
Yeah. So which tower were you in? Was it the first one that was hit or the second one?
It was the first one hit the North Tower, yes.
Okay. Just trying to wrap my head around it. Like, so it's, I don't want to say funny. It's strange to me how something so significant, because I was in grade 9. I so clearly remember this day and classes stopping, because I was in high school, classes
Mm-hmm.
stopping, and we all went into the library or the cafeteria and we're watching this happen. People are calling home, trying to figure stuff out. Because, I mean, where I live,
Sure.
we're just across the border and
Mm-hmm.
we're right by so by Niagara Falls where the power plant is, right? So everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, if this is a terrorist attack, they're going to aim here too to the power and stuff. So there was quite a lot of freak out going on. Um and what's going to happen kind of thing, and I remember it so vividly. But now, like, my kids, as my kids were born afterwards,
Sure.
years after, and now they're young adults and they know what happened, and like it's in the history books now. But
Yeah.
like it's so weird when I talk to like them or I hear them talking with their friends, and they they just kind of talk about it like it's so far in the past, it was so
Yeah.
long ago. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Like World War I was so long ago. That was like, okay, over 20 years ago, but like not that long ago. I remember it so clear. So it's so strange to me that, so much time has passed and it's still like so clear to me that I can only imagine that the memory is very clear to you because you were there.
Yeah, well, the other part about it is that since then, people have called me and asked me to come and speak and tell my story, talk about lessons to learn from September 11th, and talk about other concepts like leadership, trust, and teamwork, and so on. And we got enough of those phone calls in the last 3 months of 2001 that Karen and I decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more satisfying and rewarding than being a computer hardware sales manager and managing a computer hardware sales team and selling hardware. So I became a full-time public speaker and do that today. And I realized along the way that suddenly I'm talking to people who just think of what happened as history. So
Yeah.
my job when I travel and people want to hear the story, and people do, is to actually take them into the building with me, describe it in detail, not in a
Mm-hmm.
horrible way, but describe it and
Yeah.
take people down the stairs with me, experience the things that I did, so that when we get to the bottom and we get outside, they're with me and they come outside with me and they have a much better sense of what happened. Look, think about it this way. For you, yes, it wasn't history, but the World Trade Center for you was only as large as your TV screen or
Yeah.
pictures you saw in the newspaper. So it still isn't the same as being there. And what I want to do is to get people to actually be there. And I can do that. I can tell the story in a good way that's not a scary way that brings people in, and it also gives them a much greater sense of how to deal with blindness and blind people along the way as well. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what I do as a public speaker. So, as I always say, I'm always looking for more speaking opportunities because it's how I earn my living today. And so it's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy educating people. I enjoy talking about so many different kinds of concepts relating to it. So it works out pretty well.
Right, which is nice. Um, how, like, obviously you must have had known people in the building. I know you said your team was out, but how, just afterwards, how did you deal with all of the emotions of the day, the events, everything?
So I'm going to give you a religious moment. Um, So we were very close to Tower 2 when it collapsed. And as soon as it started coming down, everyone ran. David actually ran off. He was gone. I literally lifted Roselle by the harness, turned her 180 degrees, and we started running back the way we came. And as
Oh.
soon as we started to run, and this is in my book Thunderdog, by the way, but as soon as we started to run, I said to myself, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us.
Mm.
And I then heard in my head, as clearly as you hear me now, whether you accept it or not, this is what happened. I heard a voice that said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself. And I had this absolute sense of certainty that if we worked together, we would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did I cope? I learned from that and realized from that, as sad as it was that we lost so many people, people I knew, and so on, I didn't have control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be aware of it. I could do all I could to honor them, but I needed to move forward and deal with the things that I could deal with. So, for example, the next week, the media had gotten enough of my story that suddenly I got a call on I think, 19th of September. A gentleman said that the next Wednesday they were going to be holding a church service. He was a pastor, and they wanted to conduct a church service to honor all the people who were lost from on September 11th from New Jersey. And he said, would you come and tell your story? Take 5 or 6 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. I didn't even ask Karen. I knew she'd be okay with it. Um, but then I asked him how many people are going to be there. And he said, it's an outdoor church service. We're going to hold it in an amphitheater, probably 6,000.
Wow.
And that was my first public speech.
Oh, wow.
So that is, I've done other things, but not as a keynote speaker like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is that I learned really early on, if you will, Focus on the things that you can control. Don't worry about the things that you don't have control over. It's not going to do you any good. It's only going to
Yeah.
create fear. You know, why did I survive and other people didn't? That really isn't a choice that I had a lot of control over unless I just wanted to stay in the building and let it collapse around me or whatever. So the bottom line is don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on the things that you can and let the rest take care of itself. It doesn't mean you're not aware of the other things, but you don't have to fear them. You don't have to worry about them. You're not going to have any influence on them. Leave them alone. Don't internalize them. Focus on the things over which you have control. And
Mhm.
so that was really how I was able to deal with it. And as I learned about people that we lost, I honored them and mourned them. But I also knew that my job was to figure out what to do with my life. Well, the opportunity came to travel and speak, and that's what I do, and I enjoy doing it. It's now been 23 and a half years since we started that.
Well, I mean, at least something good came out of something so horrible, and hopefully other people have similar
I hope so.
experiences in that way. Because, I mean, like you said, we can't control that. We also can't go back in the past as much
Yep,
as, wouldn't that be great? Um,
yep.
all right. So before we move on, is there anything else that you wanted to share about just how to kind of persevere through things?
Well, I think we're going to get to it in a little bit, but the answer is you need to take time at the end of every day, is the way I suggest doing it,
Mhm.
and think about what happened today. What went well? What didn't go well? I reject the concept of failure. Things may not have gone well, but you didn't fail. The question is, will you learn from it? And that's a conscious effort that you have to make. What happened? Why was I afraid when this happened? What do I do about that? How do I learn not to be afraid? We need to learn to listen to that inner voice inside us that will always guide us and give us the correct information. And we need to practice that regularly. So we really need to be introspective consciously. And it is something that we should do daily to develop a mindset that says we know how to deal with things that come along. And when you do that, you will become more resilient. You'll become a whole lot less fearful. And you realize that well over 90% of the things that you're afraid of are the very things that you don't have any control over. So why are you afraid of them anyway?
Yeah, that's very true, actually. Can hear my dog whining because she knows I'm in here and she's
Yeah.
not. Because she has no control over that.
Yeah.
um, all right. So,
Ever hopeful, though.
oh, very much so. And as soon as I open that door, she's going to squeeze her little butt in here.
Hmm.
Um, what was I going to ask? Oh, so what are you working on now? Tell me about your book.
Well, so in 2002, Roselle was going to be honored at the American Kennel Club Canine Eukanuba Grand National Championship dog show. And while we were there, I met George Berger, who was the publisher of the American Kennel Club Gazette. And he said, "You ought to write a book." I hadn't thought about writing a book. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You should write a book about what happened. I think people would be interested to hear your story." And he said, "I can try to match you with an agent." Well, um, we talked about it a lot, and he introduced me to people he knew. But the book took a while to come to fruition.
Oh,
I actually took about 8 years of notes in
wow.
Word and had well over a megabyte of just notes and um, and talked to, and wrote all the different things that I thought ought to go into a book. And
Hmm.
then after that, in 2010, I received a call one day from a woman. She introduced herself as Susie Flory. She was writing a book called Dog Tales. It was going to be 17 chapters. Each chapter was a story of something that a dog had done. And she wanted to write one about Roselle. And she said, "Would you tell me your story?" So this was on a Sunday afternoon. And I said,
Okay.
"Sure." And I proceeded to tell her the whole story. It took about 45 minutes. Then there was a pause and she said, "You've got to write a book." And she said, "I'll help you. I know how to write and I'll get my agent to work with us." So we called her agent and he said, "Well, that's really nice, but I don't want a 9/11 book." And I said, "Good. I don't want a 9/11 book either. I want a book about my story, but I want to teach people about blindness and what guide
Mhm.
dogs are and all that. And he said, well, write a proposal. So Susie and I wrote a proposal, sent it up to him, and suddenly he calls us back and he's just bouncing off the walls. He said, this is great. I can sell this. And within a week, we had a contract with Thomas Nelson Publishing, which is now part of HarperCollins. Thomas Nelson
Mhm.
was the largest Christian publisher of books in the world. And
Oh.
so we finished writing the book. And in August of 2011, Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust at ground zero was published. And that was on August 2nd. And then 9 days later, on the 11th, we were at home and we get a call from the Thomas Nelson people. And they said, we got to talk to you about something. And I said, okay, well, you need to sit down. You got to sit down for this. They were trying to sound really sad, And
Yeah,
I said,
yeah.
well, Karen's sitting down, 'cause she's in a wheelchair. And they said, yeah, you got to sit down too. So I was sitting down, but So
Yeah.
anyway, finally, I said, okay, I'm sitting down. And the next thing we hear is, in its first week out, Thunderdog is on the New York Times bestseller list. They were bouncing off the walls over there at Thomas Nelson in
That's
Nashville. It was
fantastic.
great. It was great. And it actually made it to number one in the electronic edition one week, the digital
Wow.
edition, but it was number one week. But we were on the New York Times bestseller list for 13 weeks. And
Wow.
um, that was cool. And then Susie suggested in 2013 we ought to write a kid's book. So she didn't have the time to do it, but she introduced me to a woman who did do some writing of children's book, Jeanette Hanscom. And so we wrote Running with Roselle, and that was published. We self-published that one.
Mhm.
And then when the pandemic hit, I realized that I talked for 18 years at that point, 19
Wow,
years,
yeah.
and I talked all about the fact that we we worked to get out of the World Trade Center. I was focused, but I never taught anyone else how to do it. I didn't teach people,
Mm.
and I won't say not to be afraid, but that they could learn to control fear.
Yeah.
So again, I talked to Susie, and she introduced me to Carrie Wyatt Kent because Susie was in the middle of getting her PhD. At that,
Oh,
I think she's still getting it. I don't think she's gotten it yet, or she just got
yeah,
it.
it's
But
quite the
anyway,
process.
yeah. But Carrie and I started working, and we wrote Live Like a Guide Dog that was published last August by Tyndale House. And the idea, and it's Live Like a Guide Dog, true stories from a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith. And the idea behind Live Like a Guide Dog is to teach people things that we've already talked about here. You can
Yes.
learn to control fear. You can learn to focus. You can learn to internalize, to exercise your mind muscle and gain knowledge from it and not be afraid of everything that comes along.
Yeah.
And, for example, one of the things that so many people worry about all the time is, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they worry about all these things that are likely never going to happen. Some things do,
Yes.
but uh, the problem is that you just do so much what ifing that you develop phobias, you develop fear about it,
Yep.
rather than recognizing, okay, I'm aware that that can be a thing, but I'm not going to let it worry me because I don't have control over it. I'll worry about the things that I
Yep.
can. Dogs don't do what if, they live in the moment. In fact,
I know, they're so great.
After September 11th, we contacted Guide Dogs for the Blind and I said, how do you think all this will affect Roselle? And they said, well, did anything threaten her? And I said, no. And they said, well, there's your answer. Dogs don't do what if. It was over for her as soon as we got home and the harness came off.
Yeah.
And that's an important lesson that we all can take to the bank.
We should
So
all be more like dogs. I
we
agree.
should all be more like dogs. And
Yeah.
that, that doesn't mean that we don't use our other senses, but the bottom line is that we can learn not to be afraid of so many things. We can learn
Mhm.
to control the things that we have control over and be aware of the other things, but not let them overwhelm or blind or cause us to be paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
And so that's what Live Like a Guide Dog is about. It came out last August. And so now it's been,
A
well,
year?
it will be a year um, next. Let's see, we're doing this on the 12th.
Yes.
So um, it will be on the 18th, 19th, 20th, a week from Thursday.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
no, it'll be a week from Wednesday, the 20th. But anyway, it'll be out. It'll be a year on the 20th of August.
Wow. That's exciting. That is very
Yeah,
exciting. Yes, doggos are the best. I have three, and they are just,
we have dog and we have cat. Well, I do.
yeah.
Karen passed away in 2022, and we were married 40 years. So she's monitoring from somewhere. If I don't be a good kid, I'm going to hear about it. So I got to
That's
stay
right.
nice. Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
Where do people pick up your books?
Wherever they want. They're available through Amazon. They're available through bookstores, and if not available, they can be ordered. They're also all available through Audible. They're all available wherever books are available.
Excellent. And where do people follow you?
Wherever I'm available. Um,
And
they
that would
can
be where?
ah, they can always go to www.michaelhingson.com. That's michaelhingson.com, michaelhingson.com. And they can also find my podcast page there. It's michaelhingson.com/podcast. The podcast is entitled Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And it's worded that way deliberately because if you talk to the average so-called diversity expert, they never deal with disabilities,
Mm,
mostly because of fear, which they
yeah.
should learn to control. But they also say, well, disability doesn't have anything to do with diversity because it's a social justice thing. Yeah, that's why 25% of all people have a physical disability or a disability, according to the Center for Disease Control. The reality is that most diversity people are not inclusive. We take the position you either are inclusive or you're not. There's no middle ground. There's no partially inclusive. You are or you're not. Hey, I've got a master's in physics. I know about quantum mechanics. So the bottom line is you are or you're not. So inclusion comes first, diversity, and then the unexpected. The unexpected is most things actually. It is whatever isn't involving inclusion or diversity. So most people who come on the podcast don't deal with anything relating to disabilities or any of that sort of stuff, which is great. And just today, we actually published episode 361 of Unstoppable Mindset, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I'm only on
So,
200 something, so.
well, people can go to michaelhinkson.com/podcast and they can find us there. They can always find me on LinkedIn, in Google and other places. It's easy to Google me. World Trade Center survivor, blind World Trade Center survivor, or other things like that. But they can go to LinkedIn and find me there. We're on Facebook, and we have several Facebook pages, including Roselle's fan page and a Thunderdog page. But LinkedIn is probably where we're the most visible if they don't go to michaelhingson.com. And again, I'm going to say if anyone wants to talk about um, the need for a public speaker, would love to chat with them. Would love to chat with you, and we'll figure it out and make it work.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing.
It's my pleasure.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us again. Hit the like and subscribe button if you have not already done it. Um, because we've obviously have some really cool guests coming up, and I've got something brewing in the works that I've kind of announced but haven't really announced, and it's coming. Don't worry, it's coming. Um, and remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly.
Yes.
Bye.